What is up, everybody? Happy Friday. Clint has the day off, and so I brought in a replacement player, John from John Tweet Sports. John, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. I can't believe that you give Clint days off.
I can't, listen. He hasn't earned them, but I'm going to give them to him today. On the pod, we are talking about Glenn Schumann. The rumors are flying. The speculation. He's interviewing somewhere. He's on a date with somebody else. We saw him with someone else. We don't know what to. We're feeling a lot of. We're going to talk about Glenn Schumann. Maybe going to calm everybody down a little bit. All of that today on the Locked On Bulldogs podcast.
You are Locked On Bulldogs, your daily podcast on the Georgia Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to the show. Thanks for being here. Thanks for watching on YouTube. If you're watching, go ahead and drop a comment down below. Let Clint know that we don't need him on the pod. And hit the thumbs up. And if you're on YouTube, go subscribe to an audio platform, Stitcher, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever app you have on your phone. Find the Locked On Bulldogs podcast, subscribe, leave us a 5-star rating and review if you're listening over there. Thank you so much for doing that. John, we're going to get to some basketball for the 199 in the third segment. So stay tuned for that, everybody. I know. Fletcher, go ahead and just fast forward to the end of the pod.
Please.
We'll get you there.
Did you lock Clint in the dungeon so we could talk about basketball in the third segment?
Listen, I said he's got the day off. What I meant was I did not tell him I was recording tonight, and I called you instead because you will actually talk about basketball with me.
Love it.
But first, for the masses, let's talk about this Glenn Schumann situation. Reports are out that the Philadelphia Eagles apparently expressing interest in Glenn Schumann. Some conversations may have taken place already. Maybe even another team in the mix. Hard to say at this point, but Glenn Schumann's he's an attractive guy these days for a lot of teams. Georgia's gone through this. We've already lost Todd Monken to the NFL, and John Garcia, who was on the pod yesterday with Clint, laid it out really clearly. This is what happens. This is what comes with the territory. When you're on the top, your players are going to leave early. And your coaches are going to leave quickly. That's what's going to happen when you're on the top. And it's been happening to Alabama for the decade that they were relevant in college football. And it's going to happen to Georgia now moving forward. That being said, what are we to make of this Glenn Schumann news, John? What are you to make of this Glenn Schumann news? It's now Thursday evening as we are recording. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts are, like you mentioned, this is what happens, right? It's to be expected that all leagues, college, NFL, are going to want talent that Georgia has built, especially when you think about what Georgia's defense has been able to do the last few years. Glenn Schumann was one of the key players in this architecting this spread defense, and rethinking about how to utilize linebacker. I mean, just a lot of things. So for me, I'm not surprised that he is getting that he's getting some buzz and that teams are talking to him. I'm a little surprised, not gonna lie, that the defending NFC champions in the NFL, the Philadelphia Eagles, interviewed a guy who's never spent any time in an NFL locker room, and who never played on that level, and so that's a little surprising, but that speaks to exactly what you said of like, this is what Kirby Smart has built. You have a guy who didn't play college football. You have a guy who has never been in an NFL locker room, who now all of a sudden is like getting some real buzz around the league. Yeah. What I will say is I don't, again, as the time we're recording this, I don't expect Glenn Schumann to leave for the NFL, for the Philadelphia Eagles, specifically defensive coordinator position.
Yeah.
I think Glenn Schumann has a really, really good job in Athens, Georgia. I think he's 32 years old, and I think there is a lot of opportunity ahead of him. And I personally don't think he's going to leave, but I'm also not surprised that he is getting those conversations.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, interviews don't necessarily mean job offers, and while it would be crazy for Glenn Schumann to be offered the job for the Philadelphia Eagles, like you said, having never spent any time on that level. You know, if I was going to think of an NFL head coach that was just going to go way outside of the box and do whatever he wanted to do, no matter what other people are doing or whatever, Nick Sirianni might be that coach. And so
he would be that guy.
He might just look around and be like, hey, who's the best defensive mind in the world? It's Kirby Smart on any level, anywhere,
period,
any job.
Period.
He knows defensive football better than any other human person who's currently alive. And I can't get him. So who's the guy that I could get that's going to bring the most Kirby Smart to Philadelphia? I already tried Jordan Davis and Nakobe Dean, and I'm going to keep that pipeline going.
Listen, how incredible is it that the NFL is just like, just give us all the dogs. Give us your coaches. Give us your players. We want them all.
Listen,
what a time. What a time.
Lamar Jackson is apparently sending some terms to the Baltimore Ravens that are Stetson Bennett's coming to Baltimore. I'm gonna call my shot now. Stetson Bennett's gonna be the backup quarterback for somebody in the Baltimore Ravens organization next year. Yeah, I don't necessarily, again, Friday morning news will probably break. We'll probably look like idiots, but I don't expect this to necessarily end in a job placement for the Philadelphia Eagles. It is something, Georgia fans, you should get used to, because at some point, sometime relatively soon, Glenn Schumann's going to be gone. And that's what we're going to talk about here in the next segment. But before we do that, let us talk to you about the fine folks over at FanDuel. FanDuel is the official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Bulldogs and the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. The NBA season is just past the midway point, which is the perfect time to download the FanDuel app. Not only NBA, but you got March Madness coming up. You've got the Masters coming up. There's no off season in betting, and FanDuel is the place to go, because new customers now get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app, because it is safe, secure, and super easy to use.
FanDuel also released a line for Georgia, Florida this week.
Did they?
It was minus 17.5. It has moved to minus 20.5. So you can go on FanDuel right now
and get them for less than 3 toucds?
And absolutely.
Against Sunbelt Billy?
An October 28th bet right now, minus 20.5.
Lay 'em, Dog Nation. This man's coming prepared with stats for the ad reads, guys. Clint's never working another day on this pod in his life. Plus, FanDuel lets you combine your bets for a chance for a bigger payout with same-game parlays. Don't miss your chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, John. So if Glenn Schumann doesn't take this job, that doesn't mean that he's going to be a lifer at Georgia because he just loves Georgia football so much and he just bleeds red and black and he just is never going to go anywhere. That's not going to happen. Kirby's going to be here for a very long time. There's nowhere else to advance at Georgia for Glenn Schumann, and so he's going to go somewhere at some point. We hope it's not this offseason, but that's about all we can hope for. So my question to you is, what type of job do you think, and roughly when do you think, that Glenn Schumann makes his next move?
Yeah, I mean, I think if Glenn Schumann doesn't take a job this season, the clock is ticking. I think it depends on the jobs that are available
Sure.
at the end of next year as to whether it's next year or the year after. My personal, if you're giving me an over under for Glenn Schumann, I'm going under 3 years. I think it's this year or the next season
Yeah.
that Glenn Schumann is going to end up with a head coaching job if he doesn't take a coordinator job this year. And I think you see what Dan Lanning did, right? Dan Lanning
Yep.
followed a similar path to what Glenn Schumann has followed. Young guy, got aligned with really sharp defensive coaches, rode that out, came to Georgia, ended up, at the top of his game and took one of the best available jobs open to him at the time with Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Glenn Schumann is definitely on that path. I think he is definitely head coach material. And so for me, I also don't see any of these guys on the Georgia staff taking a group of 5 type job. I think it's going to be a Power 5 job.
Power 5 job.
And I think it's just going to depend on what's open at the end of this year.
I think that is one of the underrated beauties of having Kirby Smart leading this program. Okay, I mean, how many benefits could we list? He's the best head coach in college football. He's the greatest defensive mind in the world.
He hates Florida.
He hates Florida more than you hate Florida, even, which is insane.
Which is insane.
There's so many benefits that Kirby brings, but one of those benefits is that Kirby is the poster child. If you were to start an ad campaign, and the premise of your ad campaign was, don't settle for lesser job openings, wait it out and get your dream job. Kirby Smart is living that story right now, and he's living it to the tune of back-to-back national championships. And so he looks at every person on that staff, and he's obviously not going to tell them what to do. They're grown men. They're going to make their own decisions. They're going to do what they feel like is best for their family. But you look at the guys that have gone on to head coaching jobs, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, the last two, and they are Dan Lanning and Mel Tucker. And those two guys, one went to Colorado, parlayed that into a Michigan State job, where he is, I think, the 5th highest paid coach in the NCAA.
And insane. If you
like
beat Michigan,
$9.6 million a year he's making.
If you beat Michigan as the Michigan State head coach,
they give you whatever you want.
They give you whatever you want.
Yeah, and then you got Dan Lanning over at Oregon. I think you're right. I think that's what's going to happen. Yeah. Obviously, Georgia fans should not be that much up in arms when it comes to losing any defensive coach, because Kirby's there. He's going to solidify things. He's gonna be that solid rock when it comes to scheme and recruiting. But what will Georgia be losing when it does lose Dan Lanning, though? Let's just, even for a minute, allow ourselves to appreciate what Dan Lanning brings to this program.
Yeah, I think Dan Lanning, obviously, so Dan Lanning, Kirby Smart is the best defensive mind in college football.
Glenn Schumann. I said Dan Lanning, and then you said Dan Lanning.
I said Dan Lanning.
We're talking about Glenn Schumann, obviously.
Clint,
but come back. We need you. We're broken.
They're not that different. Under Kirby Smart, they're the same person. No, I'm kidding. Glenn Schumann, what he has done is he's revolutionized the linebacker position, the inside linebacker position, specifically at Georgia. Georgia has had so much success in the spread defense because of Glenn Schumann's ability to recruit a new style of linebacker, to move away from that kind of big 6'1", 6'2", 230, 240-pound inside linebacker that's just
6'2",
gaps.
shoulders about 6'4", shoulders about 6'4" in width. Yeah,
that's just filling gaps to find athletes who can play the run, who can cover in space, and who can run, side to side of the field. And I think that's just an underrated thing in college football. Georgia's success it has been so dependent on that particular evolution. I also think Glenn Schumann, I mean, he is a motivational guy. Like Glenn Schumann, if you see him in the locker room, if you see him before the game, he is turned up to 11, and so he is bringing the juice. And I think it's just a constant, it's just a culture thing. Glenn Schumann, what he's done is he's brought the standard. He's brought the standard for that defensive play and that defensive juice, and those, particularly those linebackers, and it's just been really just been really incredible to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I think yet again those things. You talk about schematically and X's and O and the way he sees defense, almost in that spread style defense. That is certainly something that's got to be desirable to an NFL coach to have on that level, because the NFL is mirroring college to a large extent. For a long time, the college tried to mirror the NFL game, and now the tables have turned, and the NFL is very much trying to mimic what it sees on a college level. And so, of course, Glenn Schumann is going to fit right in there. But you talk about that energy in the locker room. It's why I see him in college long term. It's why I see him as a head coach at a Power 5 university, because that juice goes a lot farther in college than it does in the NFL.
It does.
Let's just leave it at that. All right, we've got more to discuss for the 199 in segment 3 right after this. All right, John, it's finally here. The moment we've all been waiting for. Welcome to the third segment, loyal third segment listeners, the 199. Thanks for being here. Bonfire.com/store/the199. John, you can let it go now. You don't have to be so buttoned up and polished. All of the casual listeners have left. They're gone now. And so it's just us and the 199. You can speak freely. Let's talk about this basketball team. I have 2 questions for you. Number 1, are they broken? And number 2, what needs to happen? Whether or not they're broken. If they're broken, what needs to happen to fix it? No, if they're not broken, they're just something else, then what needs to happen next?
Yeah, I mean, personally, it's hard to say that they're broken when 4 games ago they beat Kentucky, they beat LSU.
Kentucky, who hasn't lost since and has looked absolutely freaking fantastic.
Absolutely. And they ran into absolute buzzsaws on the road. I don't think the Georgia basketball team is broken. I think the Georgia basketball team is a very different team on the road than they are at home. 13-2 at home, and then on the road is just
one win.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you can talk about, like, Alabama is a stinking amazing basketball team. They're out here murdering people in the streets.
They kill other teams. The Alabama. They kill other teams. It should be illegal what the Alabama basketball team is doing.
Yeah,
I stress should be.
It should be.
No one knows for sure if it is, but it should be illegal.
Should be illegal. Yeah. But man, they ran into a buzzsaw. And Arkansas, I have never seen a college basketball team shoot 63.8% from the field.
You saw Arkansas. If you watched early season Feast Week Maui Invitational, Arkansas looked like a Final Four team, and then the wheels kind of fell off Arkansas. But this is an ultra talented team, and the games that Georgia needs to win are in front of them now. They were never going to win those last 2 games.
Correct.
But now you've got Florida, you've got a road game in South Carolina, you've got Missouri, Georgia. These are games that Georgia needs to find a win or 2 in to end the season.
Correct. So I don't think they're broken. I think they ran into some buzzsaws on the road, and they've been a really different team on the road this season. I think what's to be excited about is the culture that Mike White has built is a good basketball culture. When you see this team, when you see them play, it's not always pretty. They're not always making shots. Lord knows they got to figure out how to get a freaking rebound.
They need to figure out how to get larger. That's what they need to do.
They need to get bigger.
They need to get larger people.
And more physical, yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, Mike White has to get players in. But at the end of the day, it's a very different feeling. Even in the games where they're getting blown out, it's a very different feeling than the last couple of years when those games were happening. There's a team that you look at and you're like, listen, the other team was just better. It wasn't that this team gave up or this team was out of position or whatever. The other team was just better. So. I've liked what I've saw for the majority of this year. I do wish we could have pulled out. There's a few wins on that schedule. Then when you go look and you look at Ole Miss and you look at Vanderbilt and you look at some of those games that were just tough games to lose. But I think I'm really hopeful for these last 3 games.
Yeah, I mean Georgia. It is truly night and day from what we were watching under Tom Crean, and some of the bad losses. I don't know, just gives non-Georgia basketball fans opportunities to talk about how, well, this is why I'm not a Georgia basketball fan. Like, okay, because we didn't beat the number 1 team in the country on the road.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about things like that. You lose by 5, you lose by 50. It doesn't matter to me. We're never going to win that game. We didn't win that game. We don't belong in the same gym as teams like Alabama right now.
Yeah.
That's not the next step for this Georgia basketball team. And you're absolutely right. This team is not more talented than even last year's team. This team is certainly not more talented than 2 years ago's team.
Definitely not.
And it's definitely not more talented than 3 years ago when we had the number 1 pick in the NBA draft and a top 10 recruiting class in the nation coming to Athens. It's definitely not more talented than that team. And yet it's a better team than all those teams. It's a better team in every metric, in every measure, and especially in the one that matters, which is wins and losses. And so the things that Mike White has been able to do, and if you look at recruiting, he's going to be able to recruit at a consistent level. I've maintained for years that the thing Georgia basketball needs is not an elite recruiter. The thing Georgia basketball needs is a winner, because if you win at Georgia, elite players will come. Elite players will come to Georgia.
Yeah.
All they have to do is see you win. And guess what they're going to see this year, pending Georgia wins 1 more game? They're going to see a team that won more games than it lost. That is the first step towards recruiting.
Yeah.
He's got 2 guys. He's got guys coming in next year that are very talented. If he's able to keep players on the roster, if he's able to continue in the transfer portal like he has, then the teams are going to keep getting better and better. And with Mike White there, I actually believe that a better team will equate to more wins. Whereas with previous coaches, I very much did not believe that.
Correct. Yeah, and if you look at the projections, I mean, Georgia has potentially 3 to 4 wins over tournament teams. So you got Auburn, you got Kentucky, you got Mississippi State, and again, at the end of the day, we'll see where the tournament shakes out. But if you told me coming into this season that Georgia will be 13-2 at home and potentially have wins over 4 potential tournament teams, I mean, I think any of us would have taken that. Yeah. Especially with this talent. You couldn't tell me. When I look at this roster and you tell me that team is going to be 13-2 at home,
team?
And that team is going to be Auburn and Mississippi State and Kentucky, and I mean, it's hard not to be, if you truly understand and appreciate the history of Georgia basketball, it's really hard not to be optimistic about what's happening right now.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, it very much is still on the table if Georgia wins 2 of its next 3 games and then wins a game in the SEC tournament.
Correct.
I'm not saying they will, but Georgia will be a team that is considered for the NIT.
Yep.
And I know, we don't want to be in the NIT year after year. Nobody does. But last year the team won 6 games.
Would you rather? My question was going to be: would you rather win one SEC game
for the
or be in
whole
the NIT
year?
For the whole year, or be in the NIT? You tell me, folks. You tell me.
Missouri is a winnable game. This is a good team, but they are struggling. Missouri really needs this game.
They do, and Georgia's a different team at home. It's on a weekend where
this game against Missouri is a big game. Florida, another home game, and then that South Carolina game on the road. I mean, I'm not sure if you heard, but Brandon Miller did play in that game. It was a thing where he might not play, but someone sent him a text message and was like, "Hey, can you bring us your basketball talent to the gym?" And so he just brought it. He didn't ask any questions. He didn't think about it really. He just brought it. And listen, they won.
The standard. Alabama has the standard.
Well, that is accurate.
And the standard, absolutely. The standard is, as long as you're not legally liable, as long as they haven't legally charged you with anything.
That's right.
It really, at the end of the day, the bar has been set at a legal criminal charge having to be placed on you to sit out of a basketball game.
I'm not here to comment on about whether or not Brandon Miller should be playing or shouldn't be playing or should be, charged with anything or shouldn't be charged with it. That's not the bigger issue.
No.
The bigger indictment against Alabama is that Nate Oates came out and said he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And, quote, we can't control everything that happens outside of practice. Basically, look, what do you want me to do? So one of my kids murdered somebody. I don't know. What do you want me to do?
Murders happen.
I taught him how to do the pick and roll, and then they left practice and they went and murdered somebody. That's not on me.
Murder happens. You just can't, you can't control everything.
It's a tough look. Listen, Georgia basketball has a ton of reasons to be optimistic. I am excited for tomorrow. Georgia gets this win tomorrow. I think they're in a great position to potentially contend for a postseason berth. John, thanks so much for coming on. Really enjoyed it, as always. Go follow this man on Twitter at JohnTweetSports if you don't already. And we'll talk to you guys next week.